All right, so I hope I didn't wear you out with all the chord talk and rhythm talk. It's man, there's just so much you can get into with all this stuff. As simple as a blues progression is, there can be a fair amount of complexity, and that's what makes it interesting, I think. Anyway, so for the solo section, the first, I don't know how many bars, it might be the first 12 bars. It basically is really straight ahead, between A minor and A major pentatonic stuff. So that whole now one of the things he does too with this whole thing is his subtleties are just spot on, like always. And he picks notes a lot lighter, then he digs into it. There's and I'll try and talk about a little of that as we go. But the first licks, first phrase is, and that phrase is just your typical blues A minor pentatonic, and just sliding into that flat 5. So it's just all on the G string, 7th fret to 8th fret, back to 7th fret, pull off to 5th fret, back to the 7th fret. So, and he might actually be bending that instead of sliding from 7, 8, 7. He might be bending up, but I think it's a slide. And there he just goes up to the 5th fret of the B string, skips a string, goes to the 7th fret of the D string, and then he plays that minor third on the G string, and he bends that up like a quarter tone, or so it's. And then after that phrase, this is where he does, instead of just sitting on that note, he lets it ring and start to die out, and then he just pulls off without picking. He pulls off to from the 7th fret to the 5th fret on the D string, and then he plays the 7th fret of the A string. So that whole phrase is, and you barely hear that part, but it's those little subtleties. Like every note doesn't have to be played at the same volume, and sometimes. If you don't pick those notes and they start dying off, you'll hear them less, but they'll just dynamically they sound a little cooler. So you have, and then this is where he starts bending that the minor third, and when he does that again, he picks the first note, bends back down, and bends back up without picking. So he does, and then he starts digging in a lot. So he plays that note, and actually I have a clean tone. Let me throw on a dirty tone. Sorry about that. I forgot to after the chord lesson, I forgot to throw on a little bit of grit and dirt onto my tone. So and to talk about that, he's using an amp where it's barely broken up. I don't know if he uses pedals. I'm using pedals right now. I'm going through this little 1-watt Marshall head. It's really cool. I'm going to do a review on some of my equipment at some point, but this is the JTM1, the 50th anniversary. It's a really great little amp. Very solid. The basses are really tight. And basically on the floor I'm going into an RC by Exotic Effects, Maxon SD9, which is pedal Scott Henderson says is the best pedal ever, and it rightfully is one of the best pedals. It's amazing. Then I go into a Strymon Blue Sky reverb. because this amp has no reverb, and it's a Bogner close back, so everything's very punchy. And to loosen it up and get a little bit of air to it, I go into that reverb, and then I'm going into a Maxon analog delay, the AD999. A little bit of delay. You can hear it, but it's very subtle, and that's how I kind of like my effects. I don't like a lot. I just like a little open sound, a little spongy sound, kind of like the Fenderish kind of stuff. But anyway, so what he's doing too is he's got a slightly broken up tones, so that when he gets into those sections where he bends, so when he gets those strings to really bleed together on a clean tone, it sounds good, but it sounds really good with a little bit of distortion on there. So again, what he's doing in that section is he's bending up that minor third, and I pluck that string. I do a lot of chicken picking, so even in that beginning of phrase, I'm really picking those notes. And what that leads to is the subtlety of when you do those notes where you're not picking, it really has a different dynamic effect. So you have... So those last three notes, there's no plucking. So anyway, that's a little off topic. So when he bends these strings too, he's just bending the one note, the single note. It kind of sounds, you know, weak and meek. But then when he introduces that, what he's doing, he's actually bending that 8th fret up into the 8th fret of the B string. So that's the E string bending up to the 8th fret of the B string. And you're getting those two notes ringing together. So you have... And that's that whole tension and release thing. So you got the bending up, bending with two notes, bending to the minor third, and then there he's just running down the pentatonic scale from the 5th fret of the E string to the 8th fret and 5th fret of the B string, then the 7th fret and the 5th fret of the G string. So that whole thing is... And he bends that last note up. Again, that's the minor third. He bends that up to the major third. So in the dominant chord. That was a weird overtone. So, and then he cuts that off really quick too. It's not... He's not doing that. He goes... It's like kind of like a Stevie Ray kind of thing. And then the next part, again, A minor pentatonic, he bends that minor third again, the G string, up a half step. And then he slides down on and that's the G string, 5th fret, bending up a half step. Then he bars, you bar the 7th fret of the D and the A string. So, and you sweep down that. And that's the 7th fret to the 5th fret on the A string. And you slide down to the 3rd fret on the A string. So, and then you end on the A note of the E string. So. And then the next section, again, this is all A minor pentatonic. And that section is basically... and this phrase is just the 5th fret of the G string bent up and down a half step. Pull off to the 5th fret. So that's the 7th fret of the G string. Pull off to the 5th fret of the G string, to the 7th fret of the D string. So let me see. Yeah. And then instead of again playing just the C note on the 5th fret of the G string, and then back down to the 7th fret of the D string. So instead of that, he really digs into those C notes. So he's scraping these strings, and then he plays that note. So listen to this without doing it that way. If you just do it in kind of a generic kind of way, you do. Sounds cool, it sounds fine. Then he repeats that phrase again. So, but dynamically, the first 2 times he visits that note, he scrapes. Then the next time, he plucks it. So there's a different dynamic thing going on there, which is, those little subtleties are really cool. So, and he even lightens up on that last part. So that's that section. Again, I'm going to try to go through this quickly because this is all A minor pentatonic stuff, and then we'll get to the cool little Lydian dominant. He throws in a chromatic thing after that. So let's get into that next. All right, so after that little section, he goes... and again, all that's minor pentatonic. And he lightens up on his attack there. And it's all in preparation for him to really dig into the next section. So it's that whole tension and release thing going on with the chords, and then the dynamics of, you know, really digging into playing really soft. All that stuff makes something sound just 10 times better. So and then the next section is, and again, all that is minor pentatonic. It's just a... It's just, it's a very Stevie Ray kind of thing where he does... your typical... And then once you do that, you walk down the 9th to the flat 9 to the root. So... It's actually, what he's doing there is he goes from the 5th fret of the E string to the 7th fret of the E string. Then he hammers on the 5th fret, 6th fret, 5th fret of the E string. So it's, and right there is just your minor pentatonic, your flat 5. So. And that's a really cool phrase, the way he actually twists and turns around that. Again, I would suggest, I don't know if they still sell these back issues, but I would really suggest you getting the full transcription of this. And also, you know, the prior ones, because you can really see the evolution of going from a simple solo to this little more complex one. But I'm not going to end up breaking down, like that lick, to break that down would take 5 minutes, and I don't know if everybody wants to sit through that. So we'll just keep going. Again, this is all A minor pentatonic. Again, A minor pentatonic. Again, A minor pentatonic. Then the next section is again all A minor pentatonic. But at that section, again, he kind of dials down his attack and his volume. So and again, when he seems to dial down his attack in order to proceed going into like digging into the strings. So that whole little section of and that's again all A minor pentatonic. It's the 13th fret bent up a half step and doing the same thing you were doing here. Same exact phrase moved up an octave. So it's the 13th fret, then the 14th fret barred that's on the B string, 13th fret. Then the 14th fret barred and swept down with the picking on the G string and the D string. Then you slide down to the 12th fret of the D string, pull off to the 10th fret of the D string. So, and then the 12th fret, which is the A note of the A string on the 12th fret. So that same exact phrase, and that I talked about that in one of the Guthrie Govan, the Tom Quayle lessons. I forget which one it was, but he did a lot of motifs and stuff. And here it is, Guthrie's doing the same thing. Motifs, really talented players use the same phrase over and over. Slightly different maybe at times, but you recognize them. And it gives the listener something, for their ear to attach to. And then he goes into this phrase where it's all A minor pentatonic. It's the same phrase over and over. So again, it's the 12th fret, 10th fret of the D string and the 12th fret, 10th fret of the A string down to the 12th fret of the E string. Those are the only notes he's using in this. He starts out with the 10th fret of the D string. So that again, all A minor pentatonic. And then now this next section, he starts out with, it's almost like he had the first 12 bars, I think that's what was all 12 bars. The first 12 bars he does just basic blues, A minor pentatonic stuff. Now he dives into more of those elaborate soloing techniques where he starts off with this really cool chromatic lick. It's chromatic, but it's still in A minor pentatonic. Then he gets into the Lydian dominant, which is a cool little lick. And then he goes to the A major pentatonic. So now instead of just doing 12 bars of just A minor pentatonic, which those were cool phrases in and of themselves, but then he starts stretching out, which is really, again, a cool technique from going from one thing and then getting, a little more crazy. So we'll go into that into the next section.